Families of the victims from November 11, 1994 tragedy gathered on Monday to hold a commemoration event at the National Human Rights Commission building in Kotu, remembering their loved ones who lost their lives in the fateful events of that day. The occasion provided a space for reflection, unity and healing for families and communities impacted by the incident, bringing together victim-led organizations, representatives from the National Human Rights Commission, and officials from the Ministry of Justice. The National Coordinator for the Victim Center, Adama Jallo, emphasized the ongoing commitment by the center and other victim-led organizations, urging the government through the Ministry of Justice and relevant stakeholders to continue this search for soldiers' remains which were improperly buried.
We would also like the government to fulfill its promise in building a state-of-the-art forensic laboratory for the identification of exhumed bodies. We would also like to remind the government to ensure that the remains of those exhumed that are currently lying at the mortuary be identified and returned to their families. I think this is very crucial when we talk about 11 November, because these are very key issues that we have to take note. The remains of victims that are still lying at the mortuary needs to be identified and returned back to their families to have a befitting burial. Because if not, that kind of trauma would still, continue to traumatize victims. And at the same time, to see how best they can identify the Yundum barrel, because I know for certain there are some remains still there which they couldn't identify because of capacity defects. So we would appeal to government to take it up and see how best they can get those bodies or remains of those soldiers so that the families can be reassured and have a befitting of burial for those men.
The Program Officer of the Victim Center, Siranda, offers a brief overview of the November 11 event, noting how the 1994 incident left many families in a vulnerable state, still grappling with the consequences decades later.
Heard about what happened, alleged coup plot, and soldiers were lined up and shot at point blank. I don't need to go through the entire process, entire story, because I know how traumatizing it is usually for the families. And but we know that this event really has put so many families, so many Gambians, pushed them down to even being more vulnerable in our society, and abandoned pretty much for the most part for those 22 years that the former president reigned, and left to fend for themselves, particularly the women, the wives, the mothers who were left behind to fend for the families, to take care of the young without much support. I think looking at Abdul Aziz always reminds me of how long this has been. Abdul Aziz was less than 1 year old at that time. We cannot imagine how the family survived during that period up to now.
The special advisor of the post-TRRC of the Ministry of Justice, Ida Pearson, highlighted that the establishment of the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparation Commission symbolized the government's dedication to addressing the injustice of the past 22 years.
The acceptance of the TRRC recommendations is a reflection of the government's will to implement what the recommendations, what the TRRC has said, must be implemented to ensure never again. Out of the 265 recommendations that were made, 263, all but 2, we will implement. The fact that there has been work going on this whole year and in previous years to establish a reparations commission with the mandate, the capacity, the know-how of how to grant reparations is also a demonstration of will. I'm happy to know that a November 11 victim specifically has been working with others in the selection of the commissioners for the Reparations Commission. So that person within your group knows how diligently the government and others are working to make sure that the best commissioners are there for the Reparations Commission. And in addition to that, the sales of Jammeh's mansion in the US has been dedicated to the reparations fund, that being $2.5 million. So we need that reparations commission to be up and running as soon as possible, because we know it's been very long, especially since the TRRC closed. down their interim reparations program for this reparations commission to come on board and to be able to implement reparations in a comprehensive and fair manner.
One of the victims speaking at the event expressed frustration, emphasizing that despite their tirelessness efforts to seek justice and support, many victims continue to face hardship.
Te tamit nit ki boo koy dimbale saa yu nekk dama ko dee wax nit ki soo ko dimbale danga koy dimbale ci waxtu bi mu ko soxlaa waaye puus bi dëgg la de ñu ngi try waaye puus bi dafa yàgga na métti na victimes yaa ngee sofa victimes yaa ngee dem benn li ma miin dem mooy am na si ñoo xam ne dañoo feebar amul luñ fajoo ba dañ cee jógee ñàkk seen bakkan am na si ñoo xam ne seen xale yaa ngi noonu toog si kër gi mënuñu leen a fayal ñu jànga am na si ñoo xam ne ñu ngi feebar toog amuñ luñ fajoo.
Throughout the event, both officials, victims and victims' families reiterated their call to the government, particularly through the Ministry of Justice and relevant stakeholders, to fully implement the TRRC recommendations and to continue searching for the remains at Yundum Barracks and at the mortuary. This, they hoped, will allow the families to provide their loved ones with a dignified burial. Reporting for Kirfatu, I am Ramatulai Jao.